The success of Nothing Compares to You catapulted Sinead O'Connor to superstar status worldwide. Since then, however, her name has been in the papers more often for her spoken words than her singing. Albums like I Do Not Want What I Have Not Got and Universal Mother show she has one of the finest female voices of the late 20th century. She can bring feelings from songs that only a handful of names could even hope to rival. Yet she's more likely to be attacked in the press than praised. It's an issue that makes you wonder just how fair-minded the music world really is. John Lennon was quickly forgiven for suggesting that the Beatles were bigger than God. Yet a woman speaking from the heart about issues that are now everyday front-page news in Ireland seems somehow unforgivable. She's done well to simply survive, but survive she has, and her new album, Faith and Courage, is her best to date. The road to fame started for Sinead in a Dublin home where everyone sang, and a double home economics class that simply had to be avoided.
My parents were both singers and used to sing in amateur light operas and things, and my father's mother was a great singer, and also a lot of my father's brothers still sing, and my father and my Uncle Rory used to sing like Everly Brothers songs together in harmony, and all. My Uncle Rory has an amazing voice. I don't know why he didn't go into the business, but I guess they were trying to make a living basically, and it was nerve-wracking in those days, but my father would have loved to be a singer as well, I think. And then really my parents being such music fans, like from the time I was born, my mother was listening to like John Lennon and Johnny Cash and opera stuff, John McCormick, things like that, and they were both into musicals like Fiddler on the Roof and that kind of stuff. They would bring us to those, or we'd watch them on telly, and like those were a huge influence on me, and Barbra Streisand and things like that. And then there came along, I remember very young, a TV show that Mark Bolan used to do every week, and he had David Bowie on it, and David Bowie was a huge influence, a very unusual character in that, and I would have been maybe 7 or so at that point. And then when I was 11, my brother Joseph came home with a copy of Slow Train Coming, that Bob Dylan album, which was the first time I'd ever heard anyone kind of mixing up sexuality and spirituality and rock and roll kind of all in one big pot, you know. And that made me decide immediately I wanted to be a singer and do all that. And then when I was, I think about 15, 14, going on 15, I put an ad in Hot Press one summer and said, singer looking for a gig, you know, looking to join a band. And I went around Dublin and did auditions for all these different bands, and ended up joining with a guy called Colin Farrelly, and he had a band called Tom Tom McCoot with Kevin O'Byrne and myself and some other people. So I joined them, and that was in the summer holidays, and then I went back to school to do 5th year. That was in between 5th year and 6th year in the summer between those 2 years, and then I went back to school supposedly to do 6th year, which would have been a miserable failure anyway, because all I wanted to do was sing, and I was busking all over town with a friend of mine called Jeremy Maber. We used to go busking doing Bob Dylan songs and all, and our Irish teacher was this brilliant guy called Joe Falvey. And the headmaster didn't want us bringing our guitars to school even because it was so distracting. He knew we didn't care about the work, we just wanted to be singers. So he sent notes to our parents to say we weren't to bring our guitars to school or anything, and told us, you know, if you want to be a singer, you're going to be going in the back door of buildings for the rest of your life, that kind of thing, you know. So that seemed fine by me if it was like Billie Holiday, do you know what I mean? That's cool. But anyway, so the Irish teacher took myself and Jeremy to Cork to a friend of his who owned a recording studio and paid for and helped us to make our first ever demo tapes, and we did like Black is the Colour and songs like that. And then I left school shortly into 6th year. I knew really that I wanted to be a singer, and I didn't want to waste my folks' money or time or anything doing anything else. So I said to my folks, I really want to leave school, and they were understandably, no way, are you leaving school, you have to do your exams. So I set about trying to get thrown out of school by smoking in front of the headmaster and all that kind of stuff, but he knew what I was up to, so he would just laugh when he saw me doing it, you know. So eventually I woke up one Friday morning and I had double home economics as my first session, and I just said, right, okay, that's it, I can't take it anymore. So I got a friend of mine to help me, this guy called Hugh, who brought me down to the train station. This was in Waterford. I was at boarding school, and I just got on the train and didn't dare go home and got myself a bed sit, basically, and then rejoined the band, Tom Tom McCoot, and set about being a singer. And I kind of hooked up with my dad about 3 days later when the fear died down. And my dad actually kind of obviously was very worried, but really respected me for making that decision, and then he helped me out with paying my rent and stuff like that, and really encouraged me to go on and do it if I felt that strongly about it.
Mid-80s Dublin was then, as it is now, a hive of English A&R men hoping to sign the next U2, and not really a female solo artist. But at the time, anyone who heard Sinead was hugely impressed.
Kieran Owens, he saw Tom Tom McCoot, he saw us playing live, and he was a friend of Ensign Records of Nigel Grange and Chris Hill, and they were all since U2, everyone was scouting around Dublin looking for the next thing, you know what I mean? So Kieran told them to come to see Tom McCoot, which they did, but they didn't really like the band, but they liked the singing or whatever. And as it happens, then we were in the process of breaking up anyway, so we broke up, and then out of the blue, about 3 months after that, Nigel Grange rang me in Dublin to see what I was up to. So I said, I'm not up to anything, I'm going to end up singing Summertime in pubs the rest of my life, you've got to help me. So they paid for me to come to London and make my first demos, which I did with Carl Wallinger, and we did 4 songs, 2 of which ended up on the first album. And I signed my deal then when I was 17 in August 1985 and moved to London. I'm dancing with 7 bells, watching to pick up my star, see on a black moon face, soon I can give you my heart.
Sinead's early recordings in London proved less than successful, and a battle ensued to convince the record company to allow her to self-produce. Luckily, the album The Line of the Cobra and the hit single Mandinka quickly repaid their faith.
I remember, it's really stupid, and Faulkner got really cross with me, understandably, but when he told me that Mandinka had gone to number 17 or whatever in the charts, I just burst out crying, because to me, it was a shock. I only ever made records and I wasn't expecting anything to happen. I didn't really think, well, what will happen after I put this out, and I was afraid that some sort of death would take place, that somehow my own life wouldn't be mine anymore if this happened, you know what I mean? So I remember having a cry about it, and then everyone, of course, thinking, what an idiot, you know, why are you crying about it? For God's sake, this is what's good, you know. So yeah, I mean, it was happy and good, but I had a fear as to how my life would change.
Preparing to record her second album, I Do Not Want What I Have Not Got, Sinead was determined to once again self-produce, a risky venture for what is always seen as a make-or-break record in any artist's career.
At first it was a struggle to talk the record company into trusting me enough to say, let me produce my first record or whatever, but once they did that, they maintained a respect for me and a trust in me that lasted a long time. And although saying that, I remember Nigel and Chris were very worried about putting out the album that had Nothing Compares to You on it, because they felt it was very personal and they were worried that it wouldn't do well. In fact, their quote was that it would end up on the warehouse floors like Terence Trent D'Arby's second album. And I said, you're wrong, wait till you see what happens. And then the thing did happen, obviously, and they were dumbfounded as much as I really was as well, you know what I mean? I guess I had more confidence than them. But what happened after that is they began to really trust me, basically, and even if they were nervous, they had a trust in me and a respect for me that they always let me be myself. And I was terribly lucky to have Faulkner as a manager, because most managers, not the manager I have now, but I've been very lucky, but a lot of artists have experience of managers as being very controlling and wanting to make you into someone else, you know, package you and make you behave yourself and play the game. But Faulkner was always very encouraging that I should be myself and that I could say no. Like if I went to a photo session and they put too much makeup on me, I could say I don't like it or stuff like that, you know what I mean? So I had a good team around me, put it that way, a good bunch of blokes around me who were really helping me be myself. All the flowers that you planted, Mama, in the backyard. Nothing compares
success of Sinead's second album hinged on one song, a cover version of a little-known Prince number called Nothing Compares to You. Her performance of it was so powerful that it literally stopped people in their tracks when they heard it.
I think what was very powerful about it is it dealt with loss. It brought up for people a lot of losses, deaths, whether that be the death of a relationship or the literal death of a person in your life or whatever. The song was really about loss, and the video in particular, having the tear and all that stuff, it was a song which I think helped people to express a lot of grief that they might have had difficulty expressing otherwise, you know. So I think that's what was powerful about it. Sometimes people don't know how to just get huge emotions out of their bodies, and that's why songs are so great, even more than movies, do you know what I mean? Because songs will say it for you.
The success that ensued made Sinead O'Connor a household name. Within a period of weeks, she found herself on every station and in every magazine. The Irish girl that had cried in the video was simply everywhere.
I was completely and utterly shocked at what happened, because I had no idea that people would respond the way they did to it, or that it was any good at all. In fact, like when you're that age, you think everything you do is crap, and you can't see that anything you're doing is good, or why anyone else would think it was good. But I think what, for me, it was, it came out on January the 8th or something like that, and it entered the chart in England at something like 30, and then it went straight to 19. And then the following week it went to number 1. But I think it was that previous week where it had jumped from 30 to 19. That was quite a huge jump at that time. That was like a, whoa, that's a big jump kind of situation. And then I think it was pretty obvious, like the Late Late Show wanted me on. It seemed pretty obvious it was going to go to number 1. Suddenly I was on a big tour, playing bigger places, you know what I mean, doing TV shows that I wouldn't have been doing otherwise, and people calling me Miss O'Connor all over the place, and guys offering me bottles of champagne when I went into clubs. And Krista Berg sent me this thing, a welcome to the Irish number 1 club. But the sweetest thing of all that happened was Dunleary Corporation, because I grew up in Glenageary and they covered Glenageary, sent me the sweetest letter that they'd all had a board meeting, they'd all happened to see the video, and they all just thought it was completely wonderful. And they sent me this letter to tell me how proud they were of me, that someone from their borough should have done this, you know. And that kind of thing I thought was really sweet, you know, so. I guess it changed my life insofar as it's also given me security, insofar as I know I have a career for the rest of my life, you know what I mean?
On the heels of success came controversy. She wasn't the first artist to challenge the church and the state, but the press seemed determined to make her the last. She may understand them, but they didn't understand her.
Well, I understand them, and I always did, so I don't have any problem with them, nor do I have any problem with other people having a problem with them, do you know what I mean? I understand everyone's entitled to say what they believe, you know what I mean? But I believe it's an artist's job to create debate about things that need to be talked about, and that's what I was doing as a singer and a songwriter. And like, given that what I started off writing about was, I couldn't answer questions about what I was writing about without talking about child abuse, for example, which was a very hot potato at that time. So I was someone who, as an artist, in lots of ways, not just the songs or the singing, was trying to give voice to survivors of child abuse and talk about the issue of child abuse, and that was challenging and painful and difficult for a lot of people, you know. In those days, like for example, you know, it was unheard of that there'd be a young woman come along with no hair, you know what I mean, and boots on and singing angrily in a big scream on the cover of her album. And especially coming from Ireland, it's a country where there's so much anger but it's not expressed, it's an emotion that isn't allowed, do you know what I mean? Whereas for me, being influenced, as I say, by Bob Dylan, Van Morrison, John Lennon, people like that, I could see what I liked about them was they were angry people. And it seems to be okay for blokes to express anger, but not for females, you know what I mean, and certainly in Ireland. But to me, it seemed that music was a safe place to put anger and strong feelings, rather than going around and beating anyone up or destructing myself or whatever, do you know what I mean? And my feeling about it is that, like, if I, by doing what I do for a living, can help other people to make a living, well, then that's okay. And I see it's not me they're talking about, it's their idea of people like me, do you know what I mean? And I think particularly the females who do what I do for a living experience something which is similar to racism, in that we are presumed to be, you know, publicity-seeking, tantrum-throwing, stupid women with nothing intelligent to put in the world, and why don't we shut up and sing and all that kind of stuff, you know? So I don't take it personally, I see it for what it is.
For most people, however, what it really is came down to one image, that of a visibly upset Sinead O'Connor, apparently being booed off stage at a Madison Square Gardens concert with Bob Dylan.
Well, I mean, that's something that's been kind of really written about very dishonestly. It wasn't really fans. It was a very small, organised group of people who had gone to the show specifically for that purpose, not to see any of the artists who were playing or because they were Bob Dylan fans. And what people neglect to write is that like 3/4 of the audience were cheering. You know what I mean? There was a very small bunch of people who were booing. You know, so that's artist's job, though, is to challenge people, and even to get someone to boo. That's great. Do you know what I mean? Like if somebody wakes up in the morning and they need to call someone an effer, well, they can call it to me. That's fine. Do you know what I mean? At least that means they're not going to go around and beat someone up or whatever. You know what I mean? So it goes with the territory. If you're an artist, you're going to challenge people, and you have to deal with that. I feel like I, in many ways, set my career back on track because I didn't want to be a big pop star. That's not what I wanted. I was influenced, as I say, by people who were working with the idea of the politics of spirituality and how that linked in with music. You know what I mean? So in many ways, I was trying to tear that down, this pop thing, that what I would rather be is what I am now. I mean, I didn't burn bridges for nothing. If I burnt them, it's because I didn't want to go over them. Do you know what I mean? So I'm not a stupid woman, you know what I mean? And I had a long-term plan in mind when I did the burning that I did do. You know what I mean? Those things needed to be destroyed.
I don't wanna be no man's woman. It don't make me happy, this man-trolling thing that you got from me. So I become no man's woman. I don't wanna be no man's woman. I've other work I want to get done. I haven't traveled this far to become no man's woman. No man's woman. 'Cause I'm tired of it, and I'm so scared of it that I'll never trust again. 'Cause a man can fake you, take your soul and make you miserable in so much pain. My friends think I'm alone, but I got
Stirring it up may have put Sinead back on track artistically, but it derailed her commercially. Subsequent albums failed to find the audience they deserved. Faith and Courage should change that. It's her best to date and sees her working with some big name producers, including long-term hero Eurythmic Dave Stewart.
Well, I mean, I had never worked with big name producers before, so it's not so much a question of trying to get back to anything because I'd never done that before, but it was a question of, I think, my age, the fact that I was so young when all that success came made me very frightened. I went through a few years of just being very, very frightened, basically, and I consequently, which I'm glad I did, worked always with the same people and the same producer, recorded in my ex-husband's bedroom. That's where the studio was, and he's my best friend, and that was very safe. But with this record, I really wanted to step out into the world as an independent woman, having got back my strength. Do you know what I mean? That I did find a lot of the vilification or whatever, it took a lot of my spirit away, so I was quite afraid. But when one's strength began to come back, that's what it represents, my stepping out to work with other people. Do you know what I mean? That kind of a self-confidence came back, or a belief in myself, which I would have had when I was a teenager, you know. There's a song on the album called Emma's Song, and I sent a demo of that over to Brian Eno, that he was going to mix it for me. And himself and Dave were together when they heard it, and apparently they were driving along. They had to stop the car because the two of them were crying because they really liked the song. So Brian rang me and was telling me this, and I was really excited because I love Eurythmics and everything. Like, I just was obsessed with Eurythmics when I was younger, you know. And I said, oh God, I'd love to really write with Dave or something. Next thing, Dave rings me with this Monday morning from his bath. He's in the bath in Covent Garden, and he says to me, okay, come round, I'm going to help you write your album. And I couldn't believe it. So I walk into his flat in Covent Garden. He's got his guitar. He sits there. He starts playing. He goes, "Okay, start singing." You know, and immediately I go, "You got to come out with something." He knew I wanted to do reggae track, for example, and so he put together "Daddy, I'm Fine," the reggae track. But he told me, in terms of lyrics and all, well, go home and write a song about how you left Dublin and became a singer. You know, and then "Daddy, I'm Fine" is what came out. With Jealous as well. We were talking about a friend of ours who was in a really tricky situation in a relationship, and which involved jealousy and violence, and it was really awful. We were talking about this one day, so he said, look, why don't you go and write about that? And he had written the melody and the track, but he said, this is what's happening in that relationship, I'd like you to write about that, you know. So stuff like that. So it make you write about stuff you wouldn't have thought of otherwise, basically, you know. When I'm making records, like, I am someone who I don't sit down and try to write songs, and I don't write very often, but my experience of songwriting is that when I'm walking along, like, the rhythm of my steps will make me think of things, or if I'm on a train, the rhythm of it will make me think of things, or songs very much write themselves for me, inside me. So I just kind of walk around with them for a month or so until they've finished. A lot of people will tell you who are songwriters that out of maybe 100 songs they write, there's probably about 6 of those that they feel came through them and not from them. Music, for me, as I say, is very subconscious. It's very much a stream of consciousness, and I think that's important, really, not to have a plot or expect anyone to have a plot. You know what I mean? Otherwise, you're not letting the music take over. You need to almost shut yourself off and just let the music do it, and you won't realise what the music's plot was until years later. Do you know what I mean? The music is the thing that has the plot.
And on Faith and Courage, the music's plot is stronger than ever. One lyric suggests that Sinead is asking to be heard again, and if this is the case, you really should do as she says. Faith and Courage is a brilliant album.
Faith and Courage is a sort of a motto that I've always chosen for myself and my children, a kind of a family, you know, what do you call it? You know, on your coat of arms you would have a particular thing. Well, I always write it on the fireplace of any house that we live in, Faith and Courage, to kind of remind you when you're going through a tough time or whatever that the universe will take care of everything, you know. But Adrian Sherwood, who produced quite a bulk of the album, it was really his idea to call the album that because he reckoned that's what the songs sounded like, you know what I mean, and that had pretty much summed me up, you know what I mean. So I guess it's kind of what I wanted to, if I say that the songs sang themselves to me, which I do, they gave me great faith and great courage, so I guess that's the sound of the song, that's what they do, so I would hope that that's what they, you know, if you need faith and courage, well then you buy a book that says faith and courage on it, do you know what I mean? Hopefully.
You're jealous, you just can't stand to see me get along without you, like I do, you told me to. Now you're jealous, you don't know how hard it was to be alone without you, and wanting you like I do. I would have stayed if you'd wanted, would have been willing, but you said I treat you so badly, I can't be forgiven. You know I would have done anything to make it through with you, but I don't deserve to be lonely just 'cause you say I do. You're jealous, you don't know how hard it is to be a woman in love with you, when you're so